Some 5,000 Rohingya refugees are stuck between Myanmar and Bangladesh. It's a no man's land. CNN's Matt Rivers has been there. He spoke to the refugees, got special access to a scene where unspeakable horrors are said to have happened. Here are some of the clues that he found.
These people are Rohingya Muslims, some of those who fled from what the UN calls a genocide. Myanmar's government wants you to believe it never happened.
Our main importance to save life. We affect our life.
To meet these people, it took several days and a rickety boat ride to get to this part of Rakhine State in remote western Myanmar.
So foreigners aren't allowed in this part of Rakhine. The only way we're here is on a government escort.
We're only taken where authorities want us to go. Our first stop, the village of Indin. There used to be more than 6,000 Rohingya living here.
It's Rohingya?
Their existence now all but erased.
This way? That way. Okay, thank you. So this is what's left of the Rohingya village that was here. It's completely overgrown. It's hard to tell that there were any structures here at any point. The only clues we have to the violence that took place here are trees like this one, still a year later bearing the scorch marks of the fires that burnt this village to the ground.
The government said their forces did respond to Rohingya terror attacks here in 2017, but that the Rohingya burnt down their own houses. Only local Rakhine Buddhists remain now. This man supports that story. The Rohingya started threatening the army, he says. The Muslims announced that they would have a celebration by slaughtering and cooking the soldiers and Rakhine people. Though clear evidence shows it was the Rohingya who were the main victims of slaughter. 10 Rohingya men were hacked and shot to death by Myanmar soldiers, a massacre the military has admitted to, and that 2 Reuters journalists were jailed for investigating. The UN says many more men, women, and children were savagely killed here as well. The trip then continues through a barren, empty landscape. Makes sense when you remember the UN says 720,000 Rohingya fled when violence broke out last year. A full UN report documents how the military and local groups engaged in rape, torture, and the murder of at least 10,000 people to get rid of the Rohingya, a group many in broader Myanmar regard as subhuman non-citizens.
So do you continue to claim that genocide did not happen in Rakhine State?
During the incident, there was some damage. Regarding the army, they did everything within the law. We cannot comment on whether it was right or wrong.
The question is very simple. Do you believe that genocide happened here or not?
I'd say genocide didn't happen.
Myanmar's civilian leader, Nobel Peace Prize laureate Aung San Suu Kyi, also denies genocide. Her government says it's ready to bring back Rohingya refugees like these, stuck in no man's land, forced out of Myanmar, and not allowed across the border into Bangladesh. They're staying put in part because security forces that would oversee their return are some of the same people accused of carrying out the killing in the first place.
The conditions inside that camp were obviously horrific. There's no access to education, no health care, no electricity, food is scarce, and yet still they'd rather be on that side of the fence than this one because they're too afraid to come back.
Myanmar might continue to deny ethnic cleansing, but the evidence gathered by the UN and others is overwhelming. A government-sponsored trip does nothing to change that fact.
Matt Rivers joining us now from Beijing with more on your really powerful reporting. It's a horrible situation for the Rohingyas. I mean, they've been stuck in this no man's land, as you've been calling it, between Myanmar and Bangladesh. They're in these refugee camps, like you said, with horrible conditions. They can't go home because the government of Myanmar will not guarantee their safety. I mean, what kind of future do they have?
Yeah, you know, that's the question. If we can all just agree on what happened, which I think the entire international community, absent Myanmar, really has, that these people went through incredible atrocities, well, how do we move forward from here? How do we get these people to return back to a life that they would like? And it's not just the people in no man's land, of course. That's just a sliver of the hundreds of thousands of people that are also in Bangladesh right now. And so there's a couple of main obstacles there getting the people back into Myanmar. One is what we talked about in our report, that they are terrified to do so for obvious reasons. But furthermore, there's the issue of citizenship and going back to their original property. Rohingya people, despite having lived decades and decades and decades in Myanmar, are not given citizenship rights by the Burmese government. That's one issue that they say they need solved before they come back. Secondly, they want to go back to their original properties, which makes sense. You can imagine that you'd want to do the same thing. But Myanmar's government says, nope, that's not going to happen. So even if you take out the whole we're afraid for our lives thing, you get issues of citizenship, you get issues of property ownership. And without all of those three things, safety, citizenship, and property ownership, I don't know that the Rohingya will want to come back. And then what? Then they're stuck in this limbo, and where anyone goes from here, it's just a very unclear path forward.
Yeah, and it was good to see you holding that official's feet to the fire, even though he wasn't going to admit anything. There's also pressure on Bangladesh. I mean, they're now stuck with hundreds of thousands of refugees, and they don't want to force them back either. It's putting a lot of economic and political pressure on Bangladesh as well.
It's a great point to make because Bangladesh is an incredibly poor place in its own right. This is not a rich country like Germany, for example, taking refugees. Bangladesh is not a place with a thriving economy, and yet it's been infused with about, somewhere around 1 million refugees in the course of a year. That's why they're living in those squalid conditions. And, you have to praise the Bangladesh government for at least taking those people in and doing what they can with a very bad situation. But yeah, Bangladesh can't do this forever. They want more international help, and they are pleading with the international community, sanction Myanmar's government, figure out some plan to get these refugees out of here, and yet there might not be an easy plan to make. But you make a good point, Michael, that Bangladesh is in a tough spot here. They've been dealt a very difficult hand.